to another Silk Road seminar. I'm very happy to be here with Nicole Baden. I'm going to let Nicole introduce herself in a minute, but I met Nicole at a wonderful conference in France. It was a conference on wisdom, and we started having conversations, and then we've interacted again. I saw her again when she was in New York to give a talk. I was there with my spouse and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. And we've had some communications in between. And I've been continually impressed by Nicole. I've been impressed by her interest in cognitive science, especially 4E cognitive science, and especially the philosophical dimensions of that. She's also interested not only in my work, but I believe also in the work of Thomas Metzinger, who's also been on this channel, and who I also hold in high regard. But she is also a Zen practitioner of long standing, and I'll let her now introduce herself. What we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the possibility of something like Zen Neoplatonism, meaning some deep dialogos between Zen and Neoplatonism, and why that might be valuable today. This is maybe one of the most appropriate Silk Road seminars we could possibly have, because to my mind, we are representing the possible communing between sort of the spiritual philosophical background of the Abrahamic West, Neoplatonism, and an equal synoptic integration of the East that brings together Taoism, Buddhism, and an indigenous religion, Shinto, in very, very powerful ways. So welcome, Nicole, and tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us what projects you're interested in and how you came to be interested in my work. That'd be great.
Sure. Well, thank you. And first of all, also thank you for having me on this program. I've been a big fan, not just of your work, but also specifically of this program. So about me, really the main way I introduce myself is just that I practice Zen. That's what I do. That's what I'm interested in. And the way I see Zen is that it's ultimately just a way to explore the mystery of our aliveness. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that sums it up in some ways. That's what I'm interested in, exploring the mystery of our aliveness. And then within that, though, drawing conclusions from that exploration that hopefully can help creating, a wiser and more compassionate way of being in the world. So I've practiced Zen since I was 17. I kind of came to it by coincidence. I wasn't specifically looking for Buddhism. I just had basic life questions, and it just turned out so that I encountered meditation, and that became very clearly a path for me to work with those questions. And then, so that's really basically what I've centered my life around. And I'm practicing in the so-called Dharma Sangha, which is a school founded by my teacher, Richard Baker Roshi. And he's just been my lifetime mentor and a very important, just relationship. And besides that, I did at some point while I was already practicing realize I wanted some Western academic background to just as a perspective, really basically. And so I studied psychology as well, finished my degree. And then I realized I wanted yet another perspective. So I did a body therapeutic training called Body Mind Centering for 4 years. And that's where, for me, the embodied component comes in. So that, I did a few other small things, but basically my overall interest is that my tool is language, and the question I have is how to use language so that it directs attention in a way that redirection of attention can change how we live in this world. Yeah.
And I mean, you're concerned with languages because you have teaching roles, I believe.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Could you share those,
yeah,
please?
sure. Yes, that's true. I kind of missed that part. In the Dharma Sangha where I practice Zen, my teacher Baker Roshi, that's how it works in lineage practice. You're announced a teacher at some point if you've practiced for a while and there's some feeling that there's a capacity to share those teachings. So I've been teaching Zen for 7 years now, and I'm also responsible for those 2 centers that Baker Roshi founded, the Crestone Mountain Zen Center in Colorado and the Black Forest Center in Germany, which is where I am right now. And just in terms of the formalities there, I'd be called an abbot. I'm the abbot of those centers. Yeah.
And I think the last time we were talking, you also mentioned an academy that
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. So what we did is, really Zen is based on meeting and speaking in a physical setting. That's how it's been transmitted through the generations. It's a monastic practice mostly. As a multi-generational practice, it's monastic. So people meet and speak in the context of physical presence. That's how it's transmitted. But we did find, for us, I think the pandemic opened those doors. But then we also explored that much more widely, how the online medium can really help create a lay adept transformative practice for people in their homes and the details of their lives. How can contemplative practice really become transformative in the details of people's just daily lives, in a job, in a family, rather than being sort of exclusively centered around monasteries or dependent on having to go to a monastery. We still keep that monastic component totally alive, and we feel that the way we extend practice into lay life very much as a dialogue with monastic practice. But I did found the so-called Dharma Academy, which is an online school, just fairly recently, actually. And I hope you will join me on the Dharma Academy some point for
you can count on it. I hope to go there. And we'll put links for those of you who might be interested in the show notes for this video. I heartily endorse, full-heartedly endorse anything that Nicole is leading. I've heard her speak. I've talked to her at length. I've watched her teach. She's a gifted teacher, and she has integrity and sincerity. And I think she is a very excellent representative of the Zen lineage. So hardly recommend that to everyone. I had some similar experiences during COVID, because during COVID, I taught an online meditation, contemplation, and cultivation of wisdom course, making use of aspects of Taoism and Vipassana, so sort of proto-Zen in some ways. And then I merged that into the Hellenic and Hellenistic wisdom traditions of the Epicureans, the Stoics, and the Neoplatonists, and the kinds of practices. And sort of a community formed around that then sort of merged with what's been called this little corner of the internet. And a lot of people expressed that was something of a lifeline from them during COVID. I think for many people, COVID disclosed to them how the busyness and the burnout of modernity is not necessarily the same thing as being deeply connected to reality. And when they were severed by COVID and they were suddenly thrown back onto confrontation with unexpected dimensions of reality and of their disconnect from busyness and burnout and also boredom. So many people were thrown back upon themselves, if I could put it that way. And our culture is quite inept at helping people when they confront that kind of situation where suddenly the world, you're now in some sense estranged from the world.
Yeah.
And you are thrown back on to your sense of who am I? What is it that I am? How do I connect to what's real? And so the meditation, contemplation, cultivation of wisdom course, people said, helped them significantly. Now, the thing for me is, now, of course, I'm not saying this isn't without challenge or difficulty, but pedagogically, I was able to weave Buddhism and Taoism and basically the Neoplatonic traditions very smoothly together for people in a way that they found hung together, because I basically, well, the through line for me was a mutual grounding in all of those in a cognitive science,
Yeah.
especially of non-propositional knowing. I know you're familiar with that aspect of my work, relevance realization, things like that. And so that started me on a path. Now, I want to be clear. I had already been, in fact, I was introduced to Zen way back when in the before time uh, by Thomas Merton, Zen and the
Oh,
Birth
yeah.
of Appetite.
Yeah.
Now, and for me, and I didn't know it at the time, and of course also Thoughts on the East, because he also was very interested in Taoism. He wrote a wonderful little book on Shuangzi. Um, I didn't realize that at the time, but he of course was a monastic contemplative. He was doing meditation and contemplation, but of course the Catholicism he was making use of was, of course, mystical Christianity, which is deeply, deeply drenched in Neoplatonism. And then shortly thereafter, I read this book, Mysticism, Christian and Buddhist by T.T. Suzuki, in which he much more explicitly compares Zen and Neoplatonism, especially Christian Neoplatonism, people like Eckhart. But other people have made, comparisons to Maximus the Confessor, Dionysius. Thomas Plant does a lot around that. Many people do. And then along the way, just to give people how this has been going for me, I haven't read this book, but Christian Zen. Or this one, but I have them because I read his other book on Lord Teach Us How to Pray. This is William Johnston, The Still Point, Reflections on Zen and Christian Mysticism. And then also this other book, Zen Catholicism. Uh,
Mhm.
so I got very interested in the possibilities of that Neoplatonism and Zen were already, to my mind, had already been in deep uh, dialogue. And what was really interesting is that dialogue was not merely an academic dialogue. These were people who were serious practitioners engaged in meditative, contemplative, transformative practice. Um, I'll just put a loose term around this mysticism, just as an umbrella term. It's obviously a contentious term, but I'm just trying to get a term of reference. And then, of course, I've been heartened that recently there have been two new, very current anthologies, Crossing the Stream and Leaving the Cave, Buddhist, Platonist philosophical inquiries, and Buddhism and Neoplatonism, which has specific chapters on Zen and Neoplatonism, which is also recent. And so there's also the academic philosophical pursuit now. So you have both this tradition of practitioners and now philosophers, cognitive scientists reflecting on this. So I think it's fair to say it's a pertinent topic for dialogue, and I wanted to talk to somebody who I know would show up in good faith and enter into the possibilities of what it would mean. Uh, 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 and here I want to concentrate on those two things. I want to concentrate on the philosophy and the practice um, right now. So that I could, Nicole, sorry, I've gone on a bit. That's the preamble. I'm trying to set a context. Uh,
Mhm.
the large. Let me just say one more thing. Sorry. The larger context for me is this is part of the overall idea of the philosophical Silk Road and the idea of pilgrimage as a spiritual practice, a meta practice, and the idea of um, that the sacred is adventing right now. There's something, things are coming together. People are talking in ways they didn't. Uh, uh, I think partially because of the meaning crisis, and I think partially because of the way social media and now the looming threat of AI and other things is putting pressure on our already impoverished meaning, uh, uh, meaning cultivation. And so there is a response of a rebirthing, an advent of the sacred, but we can't pretend that pluralism doesn't exist anymore. And colonialism and imperialism and your view is just an immature version of mine. All of those are no longer intellectually, morally possible for us. And we've come to realize also that religions and philosophies aren't islands. they're like ecologies. They interlac, they overlap, they interpenetrate, they mutually transform each other. Hence the metaphor of the Silk Road. And part of what I've been trying to do is afford dialogue between some of these great overarching, what I call backbones, like Neoplatonism and Vedanta and Zen, to try and bring alive a porous and proper pluralism that can get people who love the sacred, to try and give a term to it, find a way of entering into a loyalty to a life-giving dialogue, a dialogos that can spring up between them that's mutually transformative. Or to put it in a sort of colloquial slogan, if we don't hang together, things are going to fall apart. And so that's the overall context. And Nicole knows all of this, so I'm not springing this on her by any means. And so, that's that. And now I just want to settle back, open up, and initial thoughts you might have, initial orientations, places you might want to start, what questions you might have, whatever. I'll
Yeah,
turn it over to.
yeah. Well, there's so much in there. I suppose for me the starting point is, of course, there's the conceptual and, as you said, the philosophical
Yep,
way that we can acknowledge and need to nowadays acknowledge pluralism.
yep,
Um, and then there is also how we just inhabit the world,
yes,
like
yes,
at the perceptual level,
yep,
which, in just how I've been trained, is really where I'm most interested in going.
yes.
I talk a lot about what I call embodied ontology, just like how,
I love
yeah,
that. Of course. Yeah,
yeah, you would, I know. Yeah, so but just, I think that's something that we can bring a lot more awareness to.
yes, yeah,
And I mean, just in terms of who you're talking to here with me, that's where I think I have most ways to contribute, the how to actually first look at the place where we're looking from, because that is so hard to see. We're looking at things, and that's one thing to start seeing what we're looking at, but to start getting a view on the
how
place
and
we're
where.
looking
Yeah,
from.
yeah, yeah. Our
Yeah,
our our standpoint of orientation. I'm doing a
yeah,
lot of work on orientation.
yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you. I'm happy that with that orientation, by the way, giving priority to our phenomenological embodiment is, of course, something I recommend very strongly. Um, uh, but I want to ask you a bit about how the conceptuality and the
Hmm.
phenomenology interact. So let me give you an example. I've been teaching a course called Seeing God Again for the first time, and the major premise of the course comes from an idea by Wittgenstein that a picture can hold us in a grip. We can have a cultural picture that
Hmm.
actually doesn't make any sense. And now, what do I mean by that is, um, uh, modernity basically was born by the rejection of supernatural and naturalism, and a commitment to naturalism, but it had to smuggle in all the work that was done by that two worlds mythology. So it created a whole bunch of its own dichotomies: subjective, objective, value, fact, is, ought, mind, body, mind, world, all these dichotomies. And one of my proposals is that these have become so endemic and automatic that they form like the lenses by which people try to look at their experience. And that, so what I did at is, first, as I said, I'm not going to talk about God or sacredness. What we're going to do is we're going to deconstruct those dichotomies, and then and sort of almost take you on a pilgrimage, move you out of that place, and then ask you to relook at your experience. What is your experience like once you have come to a place where, at least to a significant degree, now I know you can't do this just conceptually, I'm not claiming,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, no, I hear
to a
you.
significant degree, right, you're at least willing to call all of that structure into question, and then consider, the phenomenology, and consider practices that transform your participation in your phenomenology, and then see if a sense of the sacred emerges for you from that. So I'm just wondering, like, does that make sense to you? That I agree
Completely. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Say what
Yeah,
would you?
completely. I mean, just I think that is, and again, to start that same argument from the perspective of Buddhism, the Eightfold Path starts with right views, right,
Right.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
ennobling views, and so just that's one of the main concerns I have, just to really look at the mindset of. I liked how you just used the term modernity,
Yes.
the mindset of modernity, because I think there are my sense is that there are huge blind spots
Oh yeah.
right at the center of that mindset, and that how the way that we've so fundamentally created dualisms in all
Yeah.
kinds of ways. The subject-object dualism is like at the core of the what we call valid knowledge
Yes.
in our culture is science, right? That's
Yes. Yeah.
valid knowledge. We want to
Yeah.
know if something is really true, we ask science. And at the core of scientific knowledge is that distinction between subject and object.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
that's a big problem, that the only way to have something that we call valid knowledge is based on a subject-object distinction is, from my point of view, epistemically suicidal, actually.
So I don't know if you're aware, my friend Evan Thompson, along with Frank and Glaser, wrote a book called The Blind Spot, which is basically, and it's from a 4E cognitive science standpoint,
Yeah.
was making very much this argument, and I've been making a conversion argument, and they dedicated a chapter to relevance realization, which I thank them for. But I mean, one of the ideas is that uh, like you get this when you get these dichotomies, the the place from which you're doing science phenomenologically is not, you get a performative contradiction. The state from which you're making the statements does not cohere with the
Yeah.
statements.
Yeah.
And of course science is starting to bump into this at
Yeah.
the at sort of the limits. You see it in aspects of physics. You see it especially in biology, where the organism environment dichotomy is getting really blurred in a powerful way. No, we have to talk about the entire dynamical system, because the environment shaping the organism, the organism shaping the environment, and we have to talk about multiple levels, emerging up and emanating down, and which I think is a very Neoplatonic framework.
Yeah.
But anyways, and I thought I often made it this argument in my class. I would say, you're getting into this really odd place, because you're saying things like, only the quantum level is real, and it's like, but that means, like, science doesn't exist at the quantum level. You can't do measurement at the quantum level.
Mhm.
Heisenberg uncertainty, complementarity, right? All these problems, and you don't have theories at the quantum level. And like, do you think science is real? And if science isn't real, how can science make pronounced? And where are the scientists with their consciousness and their meaning making that is needed to do the like? Where are they in this pick? Your ontology doesn't include us doing science in it. The scientific worldview unhomes, this is part of my argument for the meaning crisis, that the blind spot, so I think the blind spot's a good term, by the way, but I think the blind spot ultimately is a kind of domicide. It radically unhomes us from ourselves and the world.
Yeah.
What would you think about that?
Yeah, that's I mean, first of all, that's completely my experience. And as I say that, I'm also saying that in my school and tradition, that has a certain authority to validate something through one's own experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, first of all, that's just, of course, phenomenologically, that's what you would want to do, to check your own experience. And I think that is what a lot of people are experiencing, and where the meaning crisis is hugely rooted in that phenomenon, that there is a kind of, like, we've created a worldview that, I like to, maybe just to bring in one metaphor here,
Please.
I like to talk about worldviews kind of like circuits, like an electrical circuit, where
Oh, yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
you've been in a school, then it's just how the dots are connected. If electricity runs in that circuits, then certain lights will
Yep,
light up. And
yep,
if
yep.
you redirect, like with the switches, the electricity, then other lights will light up.
Oh, excellent.
So I think, I mean, I don't know to what extent we're going to want to go there, but it is important for what I'm trying to say right now. the phenomenological approach of like Zen practice is, first of all, its knowledge is primarily dissecting our experience in a kind of pragmatic way, with not just, maybe that needs to also be said, it's not geared towards, is this true in an ontological sense, but it's a soteriology. Like, is
Yes,
it
yes.
helpful?
Is it liberating? Does it
Is it
conduce to wisdom?
liberating?
Yes,
Is it
yes.
liberating? Do these views lead to liberation from individual suffering, but also from do they lead to liberating one from causing suffering for others?
I do think that it has an ontology in it, because I think it
Yeah,
brings out non-propositional contact with reality.
that's true. Yeah,
And we can
yeah,
come back to that. So let's put a pin in that, because I think that's important. I want to zero in on something, because
yeah,
you and I are using a term which is already making a distinction, but the distinction might not be clear to a lot of other people. Our culture loves experience. It loves experience.
that's true.
And my, and I experience this and I experience that. And the term is very nebulous. It's equivocal. And so you don't just mean, I know you don't. You don't just mean, your introspective, untutored
Totally.
experience. You mean,
Yeah.
right. So please say more about
Yeah,
that.
thank you for bringing that out. That is completely assumed
Yeah.
in what I'm saying, is that you have there's a difference between unreflected experience, which is really just the product of all of my mental, emotional, and maybe cultural habits that often, or conditionings that for the most part are unconscious or are created below the threshold of consciousness, and then we're just like, what I call my conscious self is sort of just at the receiving end
Right.
of
Right.
seeing the result of it. But it's basically, I sometimes say, it's just cold coffee. It's like it's been created in the past, and I'm drinking the cold coffee of how, and that's what I'm calling my experience. I'm drinking the cold coffee of how I've learned over just living a life and being culturally conditioned, being biographically conditioned, how things are, how experiences are processed. So what the practitioner does in a contemplative tradition is, like we just started out saying earlier in this conversation, you're bringing awareness into
Yeah.
those processes and
Right.
into those conditionings. So when the Buddha made that literally revolutionary statement to his disciple Ananda supposedly on his deathbed, where he said, "Be a light upon yourself." I mean,
Yeah.
basically, what he said to Ananda is, don't listen to the truth people may claim. Use your own experience as an authority to validate the truth of something. Then he meant the experience of a profoundly trained person who
Mm.
had learned how to release forms of self-deception,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
who has learned, like you're using, I love your term of relevance realization,
Yep.
is so like
Yeah. Yeah.
concise and to the point, who has learned to distinguish what matters from what from noise, sort of,
Yeah.
so that's what I mean. It's always, you're approaching it as a practitioner, um, you're approaching a way to observe your own experience that gets clearer and clearer, in the sense there's less and less deceptive processing added, as
Hmm.
like interpretation upon interpretation upon interpretation, until, like, in the end, you just have a sort of self-referential narrative and call that my experience.
So, that's very helpful. Yeah, I do think. And I take it that by experience, you're talking about sort of. I'm going to use a term, and I'm going to use it in the technical philosophical sense, transcendental, meaning conditions on the possibility of knowing. One is consciousness or awareness, attention, and philosophers are niggling about how those related. I'm just going to use consciousness as an umbrella term. And then there is embodiment. If you're not embodied, you're not in place. You can't orient. You can't like. I won't go on. Embodiment is needed, and then
Mhm.
relevance realization. And I think they all deeply interpenetrate. Um, and so one way of thinking about it is, I like to say to people that there's no claim that these processes are error free or anything like that, uh, but that the only thing you can use to correct them is them.
Yeah,
That's how I try to put it. So you're bound into a primordial presupposition. Any correction on your relevance realization is through relevance realization. Any correction on your consciousness is through consciousness. Any correction in your embodiment is through your embodiment, and how all three. So you can't jump out of them. There is no view from nowhere. You can't get into a no place. You're always bound to them in an important way. Now, I want to. I mean, I think we're convergent on that. Now, I want to pick up on something though, because again, and this is so I have the Kyoto School in my head, and I'm hearing the debate between Tanabe and Nishitani. Be a lamp unto yourself. But Tanabe is saying, well, yeah, but there's other power, and you did start this by saying, Zen also relies on a dialogical component,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and so it's not solipsistic.
That's right.
It's so the interesting thing, and so this is kind of I sometimes put this as a paradox. How do you involve all of the self without becoming self-centered? Because
Great question.
right.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
So, okay, um, I hope I can really bring this in a concise
before,
fashion.
before you before you go on,
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to mention to people watching, I cherish, I noticed, I hope you see that my reacting to Nicole's beautiful metaphors, like drinking the cold coffee. That tells you what a great teacher she is, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
Metaphors that live like that instantly tell you, there's a teacher. There's somebody who knows how to translate experience into language that gets you to start to experience what they're talking about. Oh, so go on. I just wanted to mark that out.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's such a great and complex question, though. I mean, first of all, let me just state where the seeming paradox resolves, I think,
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
is we've just talked before about what it means to bring detailed awareness really into the processes of mind. And
Yep.
what that also means is in how mind constructs a moment of reality. And
Mhm.
one can become more aware of it. That is completely possible. People who meditate will have that experience that you're actually getting more and more sensitivity to how it's our own the concepts and how they are active worldviews, but also like embodied, more feeling level
Yep. Yep.
conditionings, how they are shaping our experience at any given moment.
Right.
So we're
Right.
bringing awareness into that, right? So that's becoming more translucent. It's becoming sort of like, oh, now I'm not just seeing um, now I'm not just, how can I put that? Now I'm not just seeing John, but I'm seeing how I am seeing you. Like I'm
Yes.
seeing
Yes.
my own views and sort of like the warmer part of the coffee, how, a little bit while it was brewed. I'm seeing
Right.
how that is
Yeah.
present in the process. So the meditator learns to bring more and more awareness into that. The just one truism I would say is the more you do that, what happens is that conditionings keep creating distinctions on so many different levels, and they create essentially forms of self. Oh, this
Mhm.
is what I like. This belongs to my group. I am like
Sure.
this, and so
Sure.
forth.
Sure. Sure.
So,
This is where relevance realization is bound to self-reference in some
yes,
fashion. Yep.
yes, yeah. And so by dissolving how by dissolving, and oftentimes that is goes along with the process of actually um, going through. Oftentimes, these conditionings also they can have a kind of protective um, function. Like they
Well,
also,
they were presumably they had an original adaptive function, no matter
yeah,
how maladaptive they currently are. Something
yeah,
like
like evolutionarily, they create a
or
huge
biographically, like
both.
somebody's living with an abusive father, for example.
Yeah, then
And
you,
it,
yeah,
yep.
exactly.
Yep.
On all levels, like, I mean, but also just the mere, um, at the very core level, maybe I'll go there first, at least the way I've come to just, and maybe it's simplified, but for now I'll do it that
Please,
way.
Nicole.
I've come to look at what makes the human mind, just what does the human mind tick? And that's cross-cultural. That would not be, oh, it's this culture or that culture. I think the human brain has that capacity to project permanence into the world. Maybe other minds have that capacity too, but the human mind does it in such a way that it really is able to create that seemingly out there world.
Do you think that's bound to the fact that we are the linguistic animal? We use nouns and
I think
verbs?
so. I think so. I mean, at least what I do know is that when you learn how to take language out of the perceptual process, which you can learn, and then that's called
Yes.
immediate perception.
Yeah.
Once you take language out, then that projection of externality is gone. You just don't feel the world is out there anymore. So I do know that much, that when you take it out, it's gone. So you will immediately have, once you take naming out of the process, you'll immediately have a sense of what my teacher Baker Roshi calls interiority, a feeling of, oh, this is all happening in the senses. Like, I'm seeing the seeing. First of all, there's a space of perception. In this case, let's say the visual space. And within that, appearances appear, or objects, seeming objects appear, but they don't any longer appear as out there. So where I'm trying to go with this is that the more awareness you can bring into that process, and you're kind of like leading along that path, you're learning how to bring attention closer and closer to the original moment of sensorial contact.
Yes.
I mean, just like physiologically, if I look at, I have this teacup here in front of me. If I look at it, there is, in terms of if one was to describe the process in a neurology or cognitive science book, you would see, okay, there's light photons first hitting the retina.
Yes.
That's the first step of the process. And usually we're, of course, hugely unaware at that stage of perception. Our consciousness kicks in when I already call it a cup and I know its history. I have all the associations.
Yeah.
But we can learn how to bring attention closer and closer. It's a kind of, in my experience, a kind of coming closer to like the original feeling of contact, where it's just, there's contact.
That's beautiful. That sensed contact. Because and here's where I'll talk a little bit about the Neoplatonic tradition. They
but
talk about.
Excuse me, very, very briefly. Let me.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Use that point to answer your original question, which I thought was so important.
Yes.
Which was about your original question was like, how do you reconcile the whole self-solipsistic?
Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, no, I just want to close that loop here. Is so the more you learn how to bring your attention into where the contact happens, the more perception itself becomes deeply reciprocal.
Yes.
So there is the more you bring, paradoxically, and that's like Dogen Zenji, the great Zen master, says, studying the way means to study the self. Studying the self means to forget the self.
Yes.
Forgetting the self means to let the myriad or the 10,000 things, and 10,000 means each thing in its particularity, come forward to actualize the self. So we're talking the self after or within the process of this kind of awareness training is a very different self than the personal self that is in that subject-object problem.
That's great. That's exactly where I was going to go, though. So so the spiritual senses and the sense of contact with reality, and this comes from Merleau-Ponty. The idea that when we think of touch as one way, but if you pay careful attention, touch is always being touched.
Yeah.
Whenever you're realizing, you're always being realized. It's an inherently relational notion. And so the idea of the spiritual senses aren't like esoteric ESP or something like that. It's to so I know you're aware of this notion of exaptation. Exaptation is when you repurpose. Um, so you repurpose something you're using, repurpose cognitive machinery for sensory motor movement, and you repurpose it up for how you're moving around in reality. You
Mm.
move from spatio-temporal orientation into how am I orienting to reality? And as you said, I moved from touching things to what is it to contact realness. Um, and so you're exapting touch into contact with reality, and it's this realizing and being realized. But sight is also, because you also have insight, which is not visual. It's the sense that you were like before you're awakened, you're asleep in your little world, and you're enlightened. The light comes on, you wake up. There's an opening up. There's an opening out, and there's also, but the opening out and the coming in are exactly interpenetrating. Like
Yeah.
you can't say here's the one, and like when the light goes like this, it goes like this. I'm sorry, I'm speaking metaphorically now, but
I love
when
it.
and then of course there is there's the spiritual hearing, which is the sense of being called. This is the sense of you're neither forcing nor being forced, right? It's like it's Frankfurt has a wonderful phrase for it. He calls it voluntary necessity, which is
I didn't know. I haven't
like
heard of that. That's amazing. That's a very good phrase.
yeah, and it's at the heart. His model is it's at the heart of love. When you truly love, there's voluntary necessity. So I love Sarah. By the way, she sends you her regards and her
Thank
affection.
you.
She
Thank
has very
you.
highly for you. When I love Sarah so much, I know there's a sense in which that's necessary to me, but it's also completely voluntary for me. And same thing when I'm reading a really good argument, right? The conclusion is necessary, but I also like no, but I agree with it. It's voluntary, like, and so another great dichotomy, the dichotomy between voluntary and necessity, also is broken down, and you find this thing that's at the core of love and beauty and reason and flow. And that's the spiritual hearing. That's the sense of being called. That's the trying. That's the trying not to try that Slingerland talks about. And so for me, although I get what you mean by saying it's soteriological, not ontological, I think that's actually deeply ontological. I think
Yeah, I
that
hear
is,
you.
I,
That,
I
yeah.
think that I think that is our fundament. I think that sensed presence of
Mm.
those forms of contact by our spiritual senses is the ultimate presupposition that we can't we that whenever we're trying to correct ourselves and say, oh, that was an illusion, we're ultimately always relying on that in however a deform, like, I think we're always relying on that, but all that conditioning you talk about, we're often relying on it in a very deformed fashion. But we can get a progressively less deformed fashion. Is this tracking for you? Is it?
Totally. And I'm
Yeah,
just thinking as I say, listen to you, that's such a thing that I've heard practitioners say so much to
yeah,
redirect the attention into how it's a soteriology
yeah.
rather than an ontology. But actually, it doesn't need to stay there. I think
No.
it's a way to not have to make ontological claims to direct attention to that other thing. But actually, I think in a dialogue like the one we are having, we could totally talk about the ontology here, and that has profound value, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think I can't see a deep, like in a moment of insight, just to use a more everyday example, that's obviously a moment of liberation, but it's also
Yeah.
a moment of realization. Like, and I mean that in a deep sense of the word,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't, like, I get what ontology can mean, theoretical modeling of blah blah blah,
Yeah.
but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about realization of realness.
Then
Uh,
it's, yeah, I understand that now. Yeah. Hmm. That's true. Yeah.
So I mean, notice I was drawing something from the Neoplatonic tradition, and obviously there's a sense in which this is convergent. It's not identical, I understand, but it's convergent with the great Socratic project of know thyself. And
Mm.
Socrates doesn't mean know your autobiography. I often say to people, he's not asking you to read your autobiography. He's asking you to read your owner's manual, right? Like,
That's great.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you actually work, right?
Yeah.
And that's what he's trying to get at. Now, but the thing that, but I know there's echoes of this in Zen, especially in koan, because Socratic question is very similar to koan in a lot of ways. Because the point of the question, I mean, I belong to what's called third way Neoplatonic interpretation, where when Socrates is asking for a definition, he's trying to show you that you can't give a definition of courage. You can only ultimately exemplify it
Yeah.
insofar as you are trying to realize it. All right. Um, and so the point of the definitions is to sort of bring people to a realization of non-propositional knowing, as Gonzalez would say. And that's the kind of Sarah Abel-Rape, and she's part of the Buddhist Platonic dialogue group. I got to meet her. She talks about, no, as you would say, in her book on, what is it, Socratic Ignorance and Platonic Wisdom, great title, that knowing that you're a knower is
Mhm.
what that's. And now that sounds very similar in a lot of ways to what you're talking about. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I agree with how, the kind of knowing that this is about. First of all, I think so much, again, we've talked before, just to pick up the thread of modernity,
Yeah,
just how much we have this overemphasis and almost exclusiveness of propositional knowing.
yeah, it's one of my great themes. Yeah,
I know it's one of,
yeah,
yeah, and that's very much also just the kind of work when a person enters contemplative practice. One of the first things a lot of people need to learn is how just understanding something is not what the knowledge that Zen is about has
yeah,
nothing to do with understanding it.
yeah,
But it's like I like the metaphor to inhabit that place where, like, you're inhabiting a location. If, like in your example of courage,
yeah,
I like to think of a quality, say like courage, but it could be compassion. To think of a quality like a field, and we're inhabiting the
yeah. It's
field.
adverbial rather than
Yes.
adjectival. Yes,
Yeah.
very much. Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And then, like, once you're inhabiting the field of courage, then to learn how courageous action emerges from that. So yeah, anyways, just, but
No,
that's
no,
the
I think
kind
that,
of
no,
knowing.
I think that's excellent. Mark Wynn, who's a philosopher, very much influenced by for ecog sci embodiment Merleau-Ponty, but also by the Christian Neoplatonic tradition. Um, he actually recommends. I read a book by him. Well, a brilliant book called Renewing the Senses, which I've sort of used a few minutes ago. But also he talks about faith and place, and he makes a big distinction between place and space.
Yeah.
Uh, Place you're inhabiting, you're indwelling the place, and you're internalizing the place. You're having that wonderful adjective you used. You have a reciprocal relationality. You're emplaced. And he talks about he makes the proposal that we should use place as a way of thinking about God rather than thing as a way.
That's I without having read that, I know exactly what he means, but I resonate with the language of that a lot. And that's too, you said before at some point how images, we internalize images.
Yeah,
And I think one of the things that's become obvious to me when I walk in the mornings, I'm responsible for opening the meditation hall, right? So I
right.
offer incense, and then people are sitting there, and my job is to kind of walk through the hall, and there's a ritual of, but just by walking behind each person, that's intended as a greeting, or the feeling of that is a greeting, and I just
Right.
walk past them.
Yeah, right.
And one thing that is becoming so apparent is, from some point of view, from some perspective, we may think, oh, everyone is meditating. Say there are 20 people sitting in a row, and they are supposedly all doing the same thing. They are all, which is called meditation. They are all meditating. But if you're walking through each person's space,
Oh,
like physically and reciprocally feel each person is like, it's almost like a fish swimming in their own medium.
right, right,
This
right,
is
right.
our own, again, we talked about the power of conditionings. Each
Yeah,
person, like the medium we're sitting within on that 1 square meter, the space that contains our body, we're always carrying it with ourselves. That it's a charged space with all our accumulated experience and again conditionings within it. So it's literally like each person's space literally feels different.
Yes,
And you can
very
see it
much.
in their posture. So
Yeah.
are they all meditating? They are all within, each is within their own activity, which is, from that point of view, I sometimes think, again, drawing words out, it's wildly absurd to call each of these activities by the same word. It's like,
Call it by the same.
yeah.
But I mean, and this
Mm,
is what I want to say this to bring a point. But
mm.
nevertheless, they are all together in some sense too,
That's right.
right?
That's right. It's,
And so,
yeah.
well, did you want to say something, or because I wanted to
No,
make a
you
point about?
go ahead. I want to listen.
Because I mean, so the Socratic Neoplatonic tradition places a great deal of emphasis on the dialogical, where the dialogical means interpersonal communication and communing that is reciprocally is reciprocal realization, mutual transformation, and the way we've been talking about here. I use the term dialogos for
Yeah.
that. So this interpersonal. So when I say dialogical, I don't mean the just everyday sense. I mean this Neoplatonic, Socratic Neoplatonic sense. Now, what you described to me there sounded very dialogical in nature, and that so that what. So let me turn it into a question. What role does the interpersonal dialogical play in Zen practice and Zen realization?
Yeah, I think one of the geniuses of Chan Buddhism, when Buddhism came to China,
Right.
was to recognize that it just makes a huge difference when people are practicing together.
Yes.
That
Yes.
something happens. And, again, first of all, just experientially, if you're sitting in a meditation hall with other people versus you're sitting all by yourself at
Oh yeah, I know.
home,
Totally, totally different. Yeah.
different ball game. I
Yeah.
mean, not even like if one is a ball game, then the other one is a whole different kind of dimensionality or game.
Yeah.
A shared friend of ours, Sarabin,
Oh
she's
yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
love Sarabin.
she said this really great thing when the first time she ate oryoki is what it's called, but it's a mindfulness ritual for eating. And she had this sudden realization doing this with others. It's a silent meal and it's a
Yeah.
gesturalized, all the embodied gestures have a certain practice. And she did that and she got out of it and this blew my mind. She said, it's like it felt like I've been throwing the basketball in my backyard into the basket all my
Yeah.
life, and now I suddenly realized it's a team sport. Like just how
That's a great
different.
metaphor. Okay.
Yeah, it really is how different it is. Or like if you're playing a musical instrument and you think that's music, but then just how it would blow your mind if you're suddenly part of an orchestra
Right, right,
and
right.
you're seeing how other people's notes participate in what your own note feels like. It's
Mhm.
not the same tone. Even you may be playing, say you're playing the flute or whatever, you're playing a C. That C if it's just that C in an isolated setting is a very different kind of experience than if it's in the midst of an entire orchestra.
Right.
So it's that kind of feeling. The mutuality plays a huge role. And it also, the basic feeling here is that, yes, while each person it's both true. It's like maybe the worldview wouldn't just be, it's not independence. It's not only interdependence. It's maybe more interdependence or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
William Desmond. So let's pick up on that because that's something I'm really interested in. So
Mm.
let's go back. You have Aristotle, the structure of language, nouns, verbs, and the reality is like that. There are substances, which doesn't mean stuff. Substance means independently existing things, and then their actions. And then you have James Filler, and the whole Neoplatonic tradition says, but wait, where are the relations? Like the relations don't seem to be properties of things,
Yeah.
and you can't reduce relations to things. And I think James's work is titanically brilliant. And I've talked to him, and he's been on this channel, and I highly recommend it. But then, I was talking to James about this. And I said, I get this. I get that relationality supersedes substance ontology. I get that. But I said, the problem I have is I also don't see how you get the relata There's an exactly symmetrical argument. You can't get the relata out of the relations. And without relata, there's no difference between the relations. In fact, you don't have relationality. You just have a homogeneous whatever. And then he's, oh yeah, right. And then, so this, the notion that is from William Desmond is what he calls the commute. And this is from the Christian Neoplatonic, especially the Eastern Orthodox tradition, the communal nature of being. And it's the idea that relations and relata co-emerge from something more primordial to both of them. Then they're also oriented to something, and these are somehow non-logically identical. They emerge from something more primordial, and they're oriented to something more ultimate to them. And then the idea is that community, because you can't have persons without communities, and you can't have communities without persons. Communities and persons co-emerge, and so human communities are the best icon for the nature of reality. How does, and the reason why I like this is because it sounds like it's convergent with, that impermanence isn't annihilation. It's neither essentialism nor annihilation. It's somehow between either one of those. And so this idea that, so the proposal is something like this. And you can do like a pilgrimage with people. You can do like a metanoetic passage with people. You can move people out of substance ontology into relationality, and then you can move them from relationality into communing, and then that starts to get them to realize impermanence as neither like essentialism or annihilation, but as what we're talking about here. Is that landing for you at all?
Yeah, totally. And maybe just then I think once you've taken that pilgrimage, I think the important thing then is going back, which you're not going to go back to the same
Pilgrimage
place.
always means to return.
To return. That's a good point. Yeah, exactly. And you're obviously, I mean, you know this, but I'm just pointing it out. You're coming back as a different person. Once you've been to that place, it's not the person that has left, right?
So that's why I call my course Seeing God Again for the First Time.
I love that. Yeah,
it's like the T.S. Eliot poem, we wander and then we return and we see the place we left, but we see it again for the first time. It's exactly that. Please go ahead.
I just offer, very short formulas for these three perspectives that you've pointed to, and that may not be entirely congruous, but it's pretty close, I think. So one is, I think, the perspective of where we're just, the focus is the relata. The focus is how there are these different things or persons, and they are essentially separate, and the relationships are like, they're not really there. They're not. They are not what that ontology is based on, maybe. That perspective is, I think, very simply the perspective of the personal self in an external world.
I agree with that. Totally.
You can shift perspective very simply, just with one sentence. I've seen people do that now hundreds of times. I always offer the phrase just as a formula: we're also a feeling body in a living world. Like right now, we're a feeling body in a living world.
It's here. Touching and being touched. It's inherently relational.
And that, like, I mean, sometimes I do that by just having people bring their attention to their hand and feeling their hand, and then seeing, like, and then letting the hand feel the space. And people, like, I just to make that complete here, usually I ask them at first, please draw your hand, right? Before I do anything, I draw your hand. And then they will, when I ask them to do that, I ask later, so how many of you drew something that looked like, something with 5 fingers, an object with 5 fingers? Literally everyone, when I first ask them, draw your hand, they draw 5 fingers. And I call that the conceptual hand. That's what the hand looks like from the outside. And that's a true picture.
You're a great teacher. You're a great teacher. Keep going.
So, but then I ask them, bring your attention into your hand, feel your hand. Now that's me feeling the hand. That's a transitional state. But then I I say, but now let your hand feel space. Let your hand feel the surrounding space. That's a different, now the hand just turned into the subject, right?
That's right.
Before it was me feeling the hand, but now I just turned the hand into the feeling subject of space. Then I have them do that for a little while. They feel, they bring attention. And then I ask them, now draw. What if you had to draw what that felt like? What if you had to draw the feeling?
Excellent. Excellent.
And I get wild responses. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
wild responses of
yeah.
what that image looked like if they were drawing it in their minds. Like what happens when the hand feels space. But one of the first things always is it just turned three-dimensional and it suddenly has color.
Yeah.
And then I get various personal accounts of like sometimes roses explode out of it,
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
rays of light. And especially
Yeah,
though, it's always changing. You can't really,
that's
one
right.
thing that a lot of people are noticing the moment they bring attention into the immediate sensorial experience of the hand, you can't like the moment you have it, it's already changed.
Do any of them note spontaneously the sense of space changing as well?
That's the third step, and that's
Ah,
where we're
ah.
going to unity. Then I have them. Now let your hand receive space.
Oh, touching and
And
being touched. Oh, yes, yeah.
then let space receive your hand.
Oh,
What is it
oh,
like when the space that surrounds your hand receives your hand? What is that like? And now
oh,
draw that.
that's beautiful. I'm going to
Yeah.
use that if you don't mind. That's
Oh,
fantastic.
please. No, that's I like it when people use that. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's deeply convergent what I was
Yeah.
talking about. And what's interesting for me is the parallel. I agree with you. You have to prioritize the practice. I'm always tell me what you practice, not what you believe. But
Mm.
I am impressed by the parallel within phenomenological philosophy that has moved along that passage in the
Yeah.
same way. The work I see in people like William Desmond, who I think is just titanically
Mm.
gifted as a philosopher.
Mm.
So I think there are philosophers who are. I mean, I know William practices in some way, but they're moving like you're doing with your pedagogy, with your teaching.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
moving back and forth between the
Yeah.
philosophy and the practice in a very
And they can
powerful.
be, so the thing is not so much, I think, in my way of working with this right now, and that may evolve, but right now it's very clear these three perspectives are simultaneous. They can
Oh,
be
oh, always.
inhabited
Yeah,
simultaneously. So
yeah,
it's not either or. Is relata true or is relationality true? No, it's just a matter of perspective. And
that's
and that's where this image I used before of the circuitry of attention, I can shift the circuitry, like as if attention was the electricity that runs in the circuit. I can take that attention out of the circuit of a personal self and an external world, plug it into a different circuit of the feeling body in a living world, and that creates a radically different perspective in which relationality is the only, that's what happens. There
yeah,
is no entities, there's just relationality. And just the third to complete that is formless presence. I just call that formless presence.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's almost like not really a circuitry at all anymore. That's just free spreading
yeah.
and
It's
converging attention.
Nishida would call it the basho, in which uh,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
You would call it the Basho in the Kyoto school. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
The place, the no place in
Yeah.
which it's happening.
Yeah.
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 Um, So I want to ask you now a kind of a provocative question. Given that there's a lot of resonance happening between us, and I'm sort of speaking from like the Socratic Neoplatonic tradition, and you're speaking from Zen, and
Mm.
we're exemplifying exactly the philosophical Silk Road. So first of all, thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
So this is a question that I consider, and it's a personal question to me. I don't mean in the personal self. I mean it's something that matters to me existentially.
Yeah.
Um, was Socrates enlightened?
That's, yeah. Yeah. I would say, just for the purpose of what it does to give an answer, I would say yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that yes opens us to wanting to hear Socrates in a way that I think we should nowadays.
Excellent answer, Nicole.
Yeah.
That is a truly beautiful answer. Because one way you could sum up everything I'm trying to do is to get people to hear Socrates again.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm deeply touched by your answer. I need a moment. That's beautiful. That's the best answer I've heard to that question. Thank you.
Mm.
Um, Yeah, I think that's deeply, deeply right. Um, is there anything you might want to ask me?
Oh, 10,000 things. Let's see. Let's see. I'd like to get back to, in your opening statement, you mentioned how this kind of dialogue that we're doing, how that could be meaningful in today's world.
Yes, yes,
And I'd be very, very interested to hear your own stance on why do you think it obviously is meaningful,
yes.
but how and why do you think it is meaningful in today's world?
Um, I'll answer with the specificity you give it. I think there's a way in which it's perennially meaningful, but
Yeah,
why is it meaningful in today's world?
yeah,
I do think, and I'm not going to repeat all the arguments, but there's the book. I do think we're in the West and its global influence, which is now global, is in a meaning crisis, and the meaning crisis is getting worse, and there are things that are exacerbating it. And um, I do think there is a move to a recovery of everything we've been talking about here. I do think that there is a way in which that is not just something we are doing, because I'm trying to state this from a non-dual perspective. I think there's a way in which reality, there's a way in which I'll have to use language. There's a way in which individual collective relevance realization and reality realization are doing this in an interpenetrating fashion, which I call the advent of the sacred, which is a
yeah,
recovery of everything we've been talking about here.
yeah.
But the recoveries are not going to be homogeneous any more than evolution makes life homogeneous, or relevance realization means you and I are thinking the same thought. We're not. We're doing relevance realization, but it's so there is a plurality of ways in which our people are fitting to all of the ecologies and histories of where they are. So there's a proper pluralism, but like ecologies, they interlock, they interpenetrate, they mutually constrain and shape each other. They historically influence each other. And so
Mm.
I think that advent of the sacred always has I'm going to do something you do. I'm going to use a metaphor. My metaphor is from a great play called Equus. I don't know if you've ever seen. I
No, I
highly
haven't.
recommend it.
Mm.
Um, I identify very strongly with the psychiatrist in Eckhart Dysart. He's treating a young boy, Alan. Sort of spoiler alerts, everybody, because and Alan did something really horrific, right? And he's trying to figure out what it is, and the boy's disturbed, but as he starts to do therapy with the boy, he realized the boy is a religion, a new god, Equus, that lives in all horses, is coming into existence for
Mhm,
this boy.
mhm,
And he's now caught in a dilemma. He has to cure the boy of this, but he longs for what the boy has. He wants to come into the presence of the emergence, the advent of the sacred. He wants to be touched and transformed by it. This is the
mhm.
great artistry of this amazing play. So he's caught. The ending of the play is he talks about how like Equus sort of confronts him, and Equus says, account for me," and he can't, and he says, "I can't. I don't know what. In fact, I'm doing ultimate things here, and I don't know what they are. Ultimately, I'm doing." And he compares himself. I always have this chain in my mouth, like a horse that has the bit in its mouth, and I can
Mhm,
never get it free. That's how he's caught. Um,
mhm,
Now, why I talk about that is this equus eros, this equus energy in which the sacred is always drawing things together. Like if you look back in the history of the Abrahamic God, and I don't take this as what I'm going to talk about here. Some people might hear it as sacrilegious. I don't take it. I take it exactly the opposite. So give me a chance, because I'm rejecting a substance metaphor. What you see is like El, who is like the high God, and then you see, I won't say his name because it's offensive to Jews. You see YWH, who is basically a god of metallurgy and transformation and storms, and they come together. And then that god interacts with the Platonic good, and then that god goes to right is also has interacted with Ahura Mazda in Persia, and then it meets Jesus and the Titanic figure, like and Jesus draws together all these like, do you see what I'm talking about? You get, and
yeah,
this is what Equus was. What
yeah,
Dysart sees is how all these things are magnetized together, and something
yeah,
Is that
Yeah, yeah. Like, how
okay?
much more time do we have? There's so much I want to talk to you about. Do we have a little bit more time?
Yeah, we do. But
Yeah,
so for
yeah.
me, the advent of the sacred, will like no, Abraham Heschel said it. No religion is an island, and by religion I mean religions and philosophies because they bleed into each other. Is Buddhism a religion or philosophy? Like who cares, right? So. Um, I think there's this, and I see it in the history of Zen.
Mm,
See it in the history of Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism is drawing Platonism and Aristotle and Stoicism and aspects of Pyrrhonianism like and Zen is drawing Taoism. I'm reading this amazing book, uh, uh, China Root, Taoism, Chen, and Original
I have
Zen.
that, yeah. I
Yeah,
haven't read it, but I have it. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
great
in which
book,
he's
yeah.
arguing that Zen is maybe not so much a Taoist form of Buddhism as a Buddhist form of Taoism,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
so anyway, and of course, you got and then that, and Taoism has already been interacting with Confucianism, and then that goes into Japan, and it interacts with an indigenous religion, Shinto, and that's how you like. Do you see what I'm saying? The equus eros, and I think that is the way in which the Silk Road and the advent of the sacred talk to each other. What's
yeah,
happening between you and I is that equus
yeah,
eros. And
yeah, yeah,
that's what I mean when I'm talking about Zen Neoplatonism. I'm trying to found a religion. I'm trying
yeah,
to make people as responsive and responsible to that
yeah.
equus eros as I possibly can. Did that help?
Totally, and that hits, like, I don't quite know. I have never spoken about something that I'm deeply wondering about. So let me um, see. It's like I don't have views on this yet, but I do feel a calling that seems um, independent of a person's particular worldview or something, but just
Yeah.
like you're calling it the advent of the sacred.
Yeah.
But just some kind of, it's a hard, I can't pin it down, and
Yeah,
who
so many
knows.
people, especially
Yeah,
astute people like you, are saying this to me, Nicole. So
yeah,
many people from biologists to all over the place, they're
that's what
saying
I'm
it to
getting
me.
too. Yeah, I
Yes,
mean, I'm getting
yes,
the same response. I'm just like, really, are other people
yeah.
feeling like, I mean, the metaphor I hear the most is, oh, I felt called. And
Called, that sense of being called,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So I'm wondering, and it's like, so I'm off. Essentially, I'm actually of a pretty scientific mindset. So what would that agency be? Like, what is that that's calling? But
Yeah.
who cares? In a way, it's
Yeah,
more about,
yeah.
like, there's this beautiful Zen koan around uh, Zen and as Taoism. I think that whole thing you said there about that relationship uh, as a form of Taoism, and from that view, there's the worldview is that the world is it shouldn't be it shouldn't be fundamentally divided into sentient and insentient,
Oh, yes, this
but
is Michael Levin's work. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So there's like the insentient is teaching us all the time,
yes.
right? That's the view. And like Dogen's Mountains and Water Sutra is not a sutra about mountains and water. It states that it helps you how to inhabit the perspective from which you can hear the teaching of the mountain and the teaching of the water.
That resonates exactly with what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it. And so it's like, so there is that calling, and maybe the world itself calling, it may be existence itself calling in some
Yeah,
way, but
calling
we
us.
do need to listen. Like in that
Yeah.
koan that I'm referring to, the monk goes to the national teacher Nanwe and says, oh, everyone says that insentient beings are preaching the dharma, but I don't hear it. And then they have a little dialogue there. But the punchline is, Nanue says in the end, even though you do not hear it, do not hinder that which hears it.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah,
That Well, it is such a joy and pleasure to talk to you. Nicole. But we are running to the place. We're not done, but we're
Yeah.
running to the place where we're done on YouTube, and we are going to move to taking questions on Riverside from my community. But before we do that, I always like to give my interlocutor the last word. But before I do that, I want to say uh, I hope we do this again, and I hope we continue to do it for the rest of my life. It is a great
Me too.
joy
Me too. That was,
and pleasure to talk to you.
yeah, you
Um,
too.
I have invited, and Nicole has accepted, so I'm not trespassing here. I've invited Nicole to accompany me at some point on the Philosophical Silk Road, to be the person who accompanies me to Kyoto to talk about Dogen and Nishitani, and the Kyoto School more broadly. And so I'm looking forward to that, and we're going to make that happen. I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to make sure that happens. But again, thank you. This has been truly wonderful. Really, the epitome of the philosophical Silk Road in some very significant ways. Any final parting things you would like to leave with people?
Well, maybe just one word, really. We've now just opened that whole territory of hearing,
Yeah,
or listening.
yeah,
And just, I just share one piece of personal experience. How do I know that I'm actually hearing?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
the symptom, I think, is that there's, when you actually hear, for me at least, there is a silent companion of appreciation. It's like
yeah.
there's hearing,
In most
but
senses
that,
of the word, appreciation.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, exactly. And
right.
so that it comes along with, I call it a silent companion, but just with a feeling of appreciation. It's not just information, but it's appreciate it.
Yeah,
It lands in a mind of appreciation. Yeah.
you're very good and astute phenomenological guide, and
Thank you.
your propensity for poetry to put it into living metaphors is well, I'm just recognizing it and appreciating it. So thank you, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to speak with you.